I think it is one of the most painful things a human being will experience, the loss of somebody you love, and particularly if you love them. As they say, the grief is the price we pay for love. So when we love, we lose people, and when we lose people, it changes our story, it changes our names. We are called widow or widower, we gain different titles, and not does it only change our names, it does change in how we operate in the spaces that we live in, such as work. And so there is something to be said about grief and the workplace. When we think about the workplace, we all come from different backgrounds, and we congregate in the space to make money. Different people from different backgrounds, different personalities, different cultural beliefs, different values, different ways of dealing with emotion and a crisis and shifts and changes. So all these different people come and congregate in one space, and it is true that when people come and congregate in one space who are different people are going to clash. There's going to be a stepping on toes, a toing and froing, a confusion, misunderstandings, and there's a lot of hurt that can be done. And if the work environment is not made safe, made comfortable, if it's not conducive to engage different people, different employees with their backgrounds, then we are going to have a couple of problems. We need some sort of education as far as how do we deal with grief, how do we deal with leave, how do we deal with understanding, because a lot of misunderstandings can happen. And if you're going through a difficult time in your life and you lack the support from the people who you give your hours and life to, if they don't understand, if they misunderstand and hurt you or contribute to this great pain that you're going through, then your adjustment after that can be very, very difficult. So we need some sort of education regarding grief and culture and meaning and post-traumatic stress. So we need to look at that. The issue is that everybody dies, and every person we know across the globe, every person we see will one day die. So all of us experience that kind of loss, or will experience that kind of loss. And when we look at loss and grief and death, we can look at one can approach it from a medical, scientific, Western perspective, as death as a cessation of life in a body. One can come from an African perspective where death becomes then a transition where the person joins the living dead. That death is not such a negative thing, but somebody becomes part of the ancestors who gets to then have a say amongst the affairs of the living whilst they've joined the ranks of the living dead. One can come from an Eastern perspective where when one dies, one may look forward to being reincarnated in a different form or another. Or one can come from a Judeo-Christian perspective where when one dies, they get to be with the Lord and do different things. So all of us experience death, and we attach different meanings to it. We deal very differently with it. And if we misunderstand each other, if we are not patient with one another, if you don't search or respectful enough, then we can harm each other. But that's why we need education. One of the things I wanted to look at today is that what's interesting to me, which is what I tend to deal with lately, or frequently, more on a consistent basis, is that from an African perspective, there is this clash between those who are grieving and those who want to move the production line. From an African perspective, when a woman has lost her husband, there may be expectations that she may need to consecrate herself. She may need to wear black or dark clothing to symbolize the darkness, the dark cloud that has come upon her. She may be expected to use her own utensils, use her own utensils, eat from her own pot. She needs to steam, she needs to speak in a particular way, she needs to sit on the mattress. There are all these things that she may need to do, and there are those, there are those who value that, and if she values that and she has to go to work where she has to wear a uniform, for example, let's say she has to wear a covering on her head, and now the company policy doesn't agree with the dress code that she needs to have, then it's a problem. If she's working somewhere where she needs to handle things with people, but the culture expects her to say maybe put it down, and she needs to separate herself for a period, and there's a misunderstanding and the work environment cannot cater for that or make room for that, then there can be a lot of hurt, a lot of misunderstanding, and therefore complicating the grief process in that. If somebody is required at work to work a night shift, whereas the cultural expectation is that he needs to be home at sunset, then there may be clashes if there isn't good communication between her and those that she works for, or her work environment, or she needs to do certain things for herself that other people can't assist her, but then there's this presentation she needs to do. Now there's a clash of time, time is money versus time is time. The medical perspective may say, if somebody's grieving, may need to, most people that just after 6 months or a year, whenever, but in perhaps from an African perspective, time is time. Healing happens when healing has happened. So there may be these clashes, and if not understood properly, there can be a lot of damage done to relationships. All grief is valid, and people often talk about when they return to the workplace after the funeral or burying their loved one. There's a difficult adjusting, because sometimes people don't know what to say to somebody who's lost a loved one. They don't know what to ask, so maybe they keep away. But if they stay or keep away, then a person who's grieving may feel offended. It seems as if people don't care. But then people may also then ask questions, what happened, and they want details, and then that could also be intrusive. So all grief is valid, and it's very important in this situation to ask. I think that's the appeal. I think the appeal is that we have to be respectful, because we come from different backgrounds. We have to be understanding. We have to understand that people have different ways of coping. People deal with things differently, and I think if our work environments, if the working space can incorporate that, can have room for that, to talk and to discuss and to understand, I think there'll be a lot less harm, a lot less confusion and pain, and I think people who are grieving may adjust better than they are currently adjusting. So loss is painful. When we lose people we love, it's very hard, but it's particularly difficult if the people we work with, the people we work for, the people we work alongside make it difficult for us. If somebody has lost someone, I think it might help all of us to try and be more respectful, understanding, kind, and patient. And I think if we can structure our work environments in that manner, I think people will adjust better than they are currently doing. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel, and please share with a friend, and see you soon.